What the podcast is going to be about today is all about leadership in a non-for-profit cybersecurity company. So, before we get into it, Amelia, are you okay to give the audience a little bit of an introduction to yourself, if that's okay?
Yeah, so hello, I'm Amelia Hewitt and I am the founder of CybAid, which is a non-profit working in the UK to provide accessible cybersecurity support for charities and small businesses, which is quite a mouthful. But I started my consulting career a few years ago. I've been in cyber for about 5 years, and as someone that started as an IT apprentice, IT wasn't really for me, but I knew that I loved helping people and I really liked that people element of it. I could probably talk to anyone. So, having done an apprenticeship and worked within an IT analyst role in the legal sector, I then moved into security consultancy. And to say I was thrown into the deep end might be an understatement. I was straight onto a central government project as the sole assurance person, and I probably spent the first 3 months crying, if I'm being completely honest, because I had no idea what I was going to do. But something that I noticed very early on, and something that I had noted, throughout my consultancy career, was all of these big critical infrastructure projects have a lot of budget and they can spend a lot of money. So I suppose when I became self-employed last year, and I've worked within both the public and private sectors, I sort of started to notice a few differences, I suppose, in how organizations are run and how security is approached and managed. And I sort of started to realize through sort of various factors that the same budget and the same concern for security just didn't exist in the sort of volunteering sector, the charity sector, and then specifically with startups and small businesses. So that's, partially why I started CybAid. But yeah, it has been an interesting 5 years full of a lot of ups and downs, as I think everyone has in a career in cyber. But it has led to this really great place where I'm able to do CybAid and lead that alongside having a full-time advisory career in the energy sector. So it's working out quite well so far.
Yeah, so elaborate a bit on that that you said right at the end then. So you've obviously got a full-time sort of role alongside this. So how do you find the hours in the day?
This is something I get asked a lot, actually, in conversation, really. And I always laugh and say, "Oh, I drink a lot of coffee and a lot of wine," and that's probably not the right answer. But I I think it's to do with the support you have around you. I didn't realize when I started CybAid in February that it was going to take off in the way that it did, and I'm so grateful for that. But I very quickly realized, and it's something I'm very open about and I talk about on LinkedIn, is that I couldn't do everything. I don't, I'm a cyber consultant. I'm not a marketing manager. I'm not the head of legal, but I was doing all of those things. And so I think by sort of pulling in the right resources, and now we have a fantastic advisory board, and I'm very lucky I have a lot of support around me. I can do both of them because I have people that can take on some of the work, because ultimately running a non-profit is a lot of admin. It's a lot more admin than I think people would probably initially realize, and I certainly didn't realize it. So I'm very lucky to have that, and I'm very lucky as well, being a contractor, that I've worked with fantastic bosses that are very understanding that I have this additional life almost going on, and have given me a lot of flexibility for that. So I'm very upfront about it, and I love talking about it. I talk about CybAid like it's my child.
So go on then. What actually is CybAid then? Because there might be some people here that I haven't heard of it. So talk to me about what it is, why you decided to create this amazing thing that you're doing. Talk to me about that then.
Yeah, so but probably the what is the easiest thing to start with. So CybAid provides pro bono, which means free, cybersecurity support to charities and small businesses. So we do a lot of external marketing, and we reach out directly to these organizations and bigger organizations that partner with charities or small businesses. And regardless of how we're approached or they approach us, they may have a need. They may want a specific assessment done. They may just want a bit of guidance on if what they're doing is okay, or cybersecurity is a new thing for them. And that's completely normal, not knowing where to start. And I always say that as much as I can to people, is that if you're a charity or small business and security is a big mountain, that's completely normal. So what we do is we have a fantastic volunteer pool of over 50 volunteers across cyber. Once I know what the requirement is for the organisation that wants to work with us, I'll look at our volunteer pool and I'll say, you've got the right sort of skills, and we'll set up a conversation just to ascertain if they can in fact help. And then they'll go and work with that charity or small business for free, volunteering their time and expertise for an agreed period of time to get that charity or small business what it needs. So a lot of it at the moment is quite dynamic. We are working on developing what those specific service offerings are going to be in the way that you see with traditional consultancy. But at the moment, this is a really good discovery phase for us to understand what do the sectors actually need. And, you know, you can look at the UK breach surveys, you can look at all of these statistics, but really the best people to ask what does the charity sector or the small business sector need are the people within those sectors. In terms of the why, it's quite interesting. I think there's an answer that I have always given, and then there's the sort of real answer. I'll go into both really. The answer that I always give is that I noticed that there wasn't budget, there wasn't resource, there wasn't emphasis in these sectors, and I wanted to change that. And whilst that is true, there is certainly a personal element to it. And, you know, the reality of it is a sort of sad situation that's turned into a very happy one is that I lost my grandfather last year, and he spent 18 years, I think, working in local government and was very involved in a lot of local charities and small businesses and everything that was going on from sort of support level. You know, he was on the board of trustees for a few things and whatnot. And when he died, obviously, you know, got talking to those organisations that he was involved in, and I really, you know, had thought to myself, what can I do to support these organisations? I've moved away from home. I live in London now, and it's not like I was going to go and take the place he had there. But it really got me thinking about the sort of values that he had around that and supporting people. And that was ultimately why I started CybAid, because I thought, well, what can I do within my power that it would be helpful to this audience? And that was cybersecurity. And I couldn't do that on my own. I don't think I would have realistically had the time to go out and do that. But by creating CybAid, I'm giving other people the opportunity to go and do those things. So it was something that, you know, obviously very, very sad, but taking the positives of what he had done in his life and channeling that into my industry. And it's the most rewarding thing I've ever done. You know, it's amazing. And I've actually worked with several of the charities that he was involved with. We have projects going on with them at the moment. And it's so lovely to carry that on. And for me, that's why I do it. That's the reason I spend all of this time working on it and balancing these things, is because why wouldn't you want to feel like that?
Yeah, no, honestly, it's such a lovely message that you're getting out there. Really, it really is. I wanted just to touch on the volunteer pool that you mentioned there. That you got around about 50 volunteers, and that you match it up depending on the context of the situation. Could you go into depth about like okay, that volunteer pool, who is it open to? What's the general level of skill set in there, and also how do you match it up depending on the individual?
Yeah, so when we when we first launched, this was very much a I've got an idea, how am I going to make it happen? And the easiest way to do that, and possibly has been one of the most effective parts of our process, is that when a volunteer signs up with us, they fill in a form. So they are taken through probably about 6 stages in a form to talk through their experience, what they do, you know, how much experience they've got, what they can give in terms of time and what they can facilitate. And that information is then all collated into a nice spreadsheet for me. So when we get an idea that, a piece of work that comes in, I have a good idea of who I can select for that work based on the skills they've given me. I'm also pretty connected with our volunteer pool. I tend to add as many people as I can on LinkedIn so that I can sort of see a bit more about what they do and their experience. In saying that though, and from literal day one, there's been a lot of emphasis from me that CybAid is not just for if you are a professional that has been in cyber for 10 years, for 20 years, who is a CISO or an expert. We have a good number of CISOs and experts in our volunteer pool, but
Nice.
that's not the only type of person that I'm looking for. So we make a really, really conscious effort where we can to use junior talent or entry-level talent within our projects. So a good example of that is at the moment we have a Cyber Essentials project going on with a startup firm, and we have an experienced volunteer that has delivered Cyber Essentials professionally for a number of years, and he is partnered with a volunteer who is at the start of her cyber career, has gone and done a cyber boot camp, and is now looking to get a little bit of hands-on experience while she's looking for a job in cyber. Alternatively, we can't always provision that, and sometimes it's just not feasible when a client needs something to have someone coming in almost doing a little bit of work experience. We've had volunteers write blogs for us or write social media content for us. And what I'm very keen to push with CybAid is that where we can, we'll facilitate you being able to gain that experience. But whilst it's not possible, what else can we do for you? And so, you know, if someone's looking for a mentor, we can facilitate that. We have the connections to do that. And so it's something that has been really important to me and will be as CybAid continues to grow, is having an opportunity to give back to cybersecurity as well as giving out to the organisations we work with.
We really are a shining light on the industry, you know what I mean? This is really, really good stuff. I'm not just saying this as a podcast or speaking to a podcast. I'm saying this is really good, genuine stuff, this, Amelia. So,
thank you.
Like, in terms of that, because I speak to organisations time and time again, and I speak to candidates in my line of work. Well, I just can't get the experience. It's a chicken and egg, and I've said on previous podcasts about whether this low hanging fruit, these organisations such as charities or such as companies on the high street which security isn't the forefront of the mind. I've always kind of wondered how do you marry the two up, because you've got companies that can't really afford security but need it, or they might not be aware that they need it, and you've got people that are crying out for this experience. It just sounds like this marries up the perfect opportunity for people to not break the bank, not break the bank at all, and B, but getting people real life experience on real life projects where they're actually changing things. So it sounds like a really good opportunity. So talk to me about now this might be me being a little bit cold now. So talk to me about the business side of it. Talk to me about the fact that why are you doing it in sense of the time that you're putting into this? You could be doing your courses for your personal development and looking out for number one. Why? I mean, really cold here. Why are you doing it?
And that's understandable, and actually I've been asked that before by organisations that we're working with, and I think it's a very valid question, and I think there is a natural level of suspicion we all have as humans when someone wants to do something good, and I get that because I'm exactly the same. And you know, it's interesting. I think for me, I have been incredibly fortunate with my career that within 5 years I've built up the experience I have to now be self-employed, and I've built up the experience I have to have the role that I have and the lifestyle that has given me, that with the time that I had in terms of spare time, and I'm also doing a degree, so I clearly like to keep myself busy. I just thought I don't want to make more money because I don't know why, you know, that's not going to make me happier, but I want to do something good. And one thing that I suppose, and perhaps a lot of people feel like this, and I've spoken to people even this week about it, is that sometimes when you work for large organizations, you don't feel like you're making an impact, and you don't feel like what you're doing is necessarily that important in terms of you're a small cog in a big wheel. And that's, you know, just the reality of being a consultant sometimes. Whereas with CybAid, you can see tangibly the difference you're making. And for me, I need that. I want to feel passionate about the industry I work in, and sometimes I don't. And that's the reality, is that sometimes we will become a bit disillusioned with the world of cyber because it is quite intense sometimes. And I think for me, alongside processing the grief of a bereavement, CybAid gave me something that was so hopeful and so positive, and that probably sounds so airy-fairy, but for me it was just, why wouldn't you want to go and do that? Why wouldn't you want to spend time helping people? And you know, the feedback we receive is so lovely for me to hear that our volunteers are getting to do something that they want to do and they want to give their time to, and that sort of small organizations that wouldn't have this support can now have it. And you know, I say why wouldn't you a lot, but to me, it just felt so natural to just go and do that rather than doing something that was necessarily profitable or more education or anything like that. So it maybe is a non-answer, but it just felt quite natural to go and do.
Yeah, and that's the answer there. Do you know what I mean? Like I fully appreciate that. Like, yeah, I'm coming at it from another point in terms of like, okay, how does it work business wise? And my next question is a little bit on the same path as well, just because I know that these are going to be the questions that need to get out there as CybAid grows. So very much tangenting on that CybAid growing. It's very much in its infancy now, but it sounds like already some great traction that's happening with it. What is the long term roadmap? How do you intend to grow from where it's at now?
It's a good question. It's a very good question. So I would say we have been in our forming stage over the last, and we've been running for just short of 3 months. So by that, I mean, figuring out what it is we're doing the legal bits. So we're a registered CIC, which is a community interest company, which is a type of non-profit in the UK. We've been getting in our governance structure. We have agreements for volunteers. We have agreements for the organisations we work with. All of those sort of setup pieces we've been doing whilst also delivering. I could not be doing that on my own. So I now have a fantastic board of 3 advisors who are all very successful in their own right within the cybersecurity space. And now we are looking at strategy. They have some of the best ideas I have heard, and some things that just make me think, why didn't I think of that? But I think the long-term plan for us, really, now that we're in the sort of we formed, we're a legal entity, we're a real thing that exists, which is also so bizarre to me. But from here, it's how do we refine what we're doing? So how do we streamline our offerings so that what we're doing is really specific and repeatable? And I've never built a consultancy, but I have worked in consultancy. So I know what works and what doesn't in terms of delivery, but we're not delivering to that commercial market. So there are going to be things that are different. So as part of our strategy plan for the next 6 months, it is really connecting with the charity sector, with the small business sector, to streamline our offerings, to be consistent and to be effective. I think our cybersecurity is only going to be as effective as it is accessible to the audience that it's being given to. There is no point in giving you a whole suite of policies that you're never going to use or pick up. That's ineffective. Whereas what we're looking to do is really see where we can plug those gaps. We're also looking to build out our partnerships. So we would like to partner with other organisations where we can provide support to a wider audience or to what they're doing within cyber and outside of cyber. But I think mostly it's growing the awareness for CybAid, and that's a big thing, is that initially it started out as my network and the people I knew, but getting the word out there further is the important thing, because people can't ask for help if they don't know it exists. And so for me, as much as we're doing the work on the inside to tie all of the ends together and make sure that everything we're doing is robust and repeatable and actually quite effective, it's more making sure people know we exist.
And it really surprises me, and I hope this doesn't come across as condescending or patronising in any way, shape, or form, because that's not what I mean. But you coming from a technical background, who taught you all this this astuteness in commerciality, this business side? Was it the fact that you've worked in a consultancy before, or where have you sort of got this from?
It's no, it's not condescending at all. And I think these are great questions. I think firstly, my dad works in sales and has done my entire life, and has done very well doing that. And I don't think that necessarily had taught me business acumen, but it has really taught me how you interact with other people. And a huge part of being a founder that I'm picking up is, it doesn't matter that I don't know all of these things, but how I am as a person to interact with and how others feel about their interactions with me is so important. I said, and second to that, one of our board advisors, Tanesh, has worked and built cyber startups for a very long time, and he has given me a lot of guidance around what to do. But I think also there's the element of, when you're not making money and you're not at the peril of an investor and what they want you to do, it's a lot easier to figure these things out, because the only person that's putting pressure on this to work is me. And that is the kind of reality of it, really, is that so it takes me a little bit longer to figure these elements out. And I do a lot of Googling. I don't know everything and I don't pertain to know everything. That's fine. I'm not, there's not a race to meet a certain profit margin. There's not a race to have scaled to X number of clients or volunteers in a certain period of time. And I think taking that pressure off means that you can figure those things out for yourself. I do a lot of asking the people around me, and I get a few DMs on LinkedIn from people offering their advice on being a founder or doing things like this. And I always take people up on that opportunity, because I've always been very clear that I've never done this before, and everyone else's opinion is so valuable to me in how to do it. So I think part of it is maybe just how I've learned and been taught to interact with others, and a part of it is just that other people are very kind and willing to help, and that is really what's made CybAid what it is.
Yeah, no, amazing. And where do you sort of where do you want to be at the 12-month mark with CybAid? What do you have a goal in mind as to the stature of the organization, the outreach that it's doing by the 12-month mark?
Interestingly, I had this conversation with another one of our board advisors the other day who'd asked me this, and I think it is okay for me to say I don't exactly know, but what I tend to think in terms of when I think about that is I would like to be a trusted partner for the small business and charity sectors for cybersecurity. Now that isn't quantifiable, right? But it is something that you almost can measure in terms of how people's experience with your organization is. And so for me, that's what I want. I want people to know CybAid as we can go to them when we need something, and they have the advice and they can give us that reassurance that we need. Personally, in terms of how I'd like it to be, is I would like to be less involved in the day-to-day delivery. And I say that because, like you pointed out, it is a lot. And I oversee every engagement we have at the moment, and I'm overseeing all of the sort of smaller pieces we're doing. And that's ultimately why I now have a board, is so that I don't have to be as involved in that. So on a personal level, I'd really like to be more involved in the strategy side of CybAid rather than the delivery side. But I recognise that that isn't possible until we grow a bit more and we're a bit more mature. So, it can be really hard to answer that, because I think for me, I never anticipated that this was going to work, which is probably not something that founders admit to very often, but it has had such a fantastic trajectory, and it's become already so much more than I'd anticipated, that it's really difficult to almost see it being more. And everything I do surprises me, and every event I get invited to or opportunity I get to speak about it still really surprises
Yeah,
me.
yeah. And no, I listen to a lot of podcasts about sort of being a founder, and a lot of them say the same thing in the sense of like, you just sometimes just have to take that gamble. You have to jump in both feet, and then you can't just map it out and it hit every single checkpoint. It's got to be up and down. It's got to be up and down, because that's life, and you're dealing with people, and people change their minds, and yeah, that's where it's at. So no, it sounds really interesting. And why do you think? Why do you think it's not been done before? Why do you think someone before you hasn't come across and done CybAid? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, it has been done before, just not in the same way. So this is a comment that I received on some content I had put out on social media when I first started, was that companies have been doing this for years. This isn't new. And, firstly, what a strange thing to say. But secondly, I agree. Big companies and companies I've worked for and big consultancies, they do give their staff time to do these things. And some of them do even have initiatives like CybAid. However, the majority of volunteers that work with us haven't had the opportunity to do this in their employment. And I'd never seen, we have the cyber helpline, which helps people on an individual basis, but I'd never seen anything for businesses. And so the idea itself isn't new. I'm not the first person to go and offer these services. However, there wasn't a facilitator to do this, and there wasn't a way in which people could express their interest, and then be part of almost like a bench of professionals who may get used if they're needed to, but there's no obligation for them. There wasn't any of this in place. And I think the reason why is probably because it takes time for these things to be set up. And I know that there are people in other areas of the world doing very similar things. But for me, it wasn't something in the communities that I am in. And that was it, really. It wasn't
Yeah.
something that I had done loads of market research on and knew loads about. It was just this feeling of, I think I can probably do something here. I don't know what, and I don't know how big it's going to be, but as you say, it's almost like you just have to take that leap and do it. And
Yeah.
there's always that feeling, and I even feel like it now, is that if this doesn't work, everyone knows about it now. It's not like it was just this idea I was planning to
Mhm.
myself. This is something I've been very vocal about. But if you thought like that forever, you'd never do anything. And I think that was what it was for me, is that I'd put it off and put it off. That it got to a point where on the Friday I sat down, I made the website, I put everything together, and I think I'd launched on the Tuesday afterwards. It
Yeah.
just had to be done, I think.
Yeah. And that links really nicely to pretty much one of my last questions. And it is, I think a lot of people, where they're falling down is maybe the imposter syndrome. So how did you overcome it? Or are you still overcoming it now?
Yeah, I think this is an amazing question. And I can say quite honestly, I've never felt imposter syndrome as bad as I have done in the last few months.
Yep.
However, I don't think that that is necessarily a negative thing. And I think that it's really fantastic advice that actually I got from my personal trainer very recently when I was telling her about it. Because I go in there and I'm like ranting about work and ranting about how all these things have got on and how overwhelming it can be. And she had said to me, you have to start reframing these overwhelming experiences that are very much elements of imposter syndrome into positive things. And I'd thought about it, and at first I'm sort of like, yeah, but I've never done that before, and I've never had to do this kind of talk or this kind of event. And then I thought about it more, and I thought, well, if I wasn't capable, I wouldn't have been asked. And I think that's something that you have to tell yourself until you believe. I
Yeah.
really don't necessarily believe in the fake it till you make it culture, because that's exhausting. I've been there, I've tried it. It's exhausting. It can be really hard to pretend to be someone you're not.
Yeah.
And authenticity is really resonates with people. So the fact that I can openly say I feel a lot of imposter syndrome, especially as a founder, because I don't necessarily know what I'm doing. And oh, what if the world finds that out? Well, that's quite normal that I don't know what I'm doing, because I've never done it before. So I think people like that, and I think that's what makes me, I'd like to think, approachable, because I'm quite honest about that and I'm quite open about it. And I think that it's very natural if you went into projects like this or businesses with the mindset that I know everything and it's all going to work out fine for me. It's probably not, because you have to have that element of cautiousness and risk that helps you to grow as a person. And I think that that then feeds into your business, your non-profit. So yeah, I feel a lot of imposter syndrome, but I'm also working really hard to reframe that to make it into a positive experience, because ultimately I'm doing this because I enjoy it, not because I have to. So why would I make it negative for myself? But I've been there, and some days it's a lot easier to manage than others. But I ultimately think that the more we have these conversations, especially in cybersecurity, the easier it's going to be for people to manage, because people don't feel so alone. And imposter syndrome can be quite isolating, because it's almost like holding your hands up and saying, I don't think I deserve to be at this table.
Yeah.
And that is a really hard thing for people to admit, especially if you're not in an environment where you can admit it. So I would say the more open we are about it, and that's why I'm so open about it, the more we can help people with it. And for me, certainly, I can message my team and say, I'm actually not feeling great about this thing today, and I can get help and I can get advice. And I had a post go up today about Stress Awareness Month, and one of the things I was talking about was being able to delegate and being open about it.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I think that's what really helped as a founder, but also just as a human being. It's helped me to manage these feelings.
Yeah. Amelia, if everyone was like you, the world would be a much nicer place. Let me tell you that. Now, that brings us pretty much to our time. So please do keep on shouting it from the rooftop. CybAid sounds like such an amazing, amazing piece of work that you're doing. So if anybody has any questions, I'm sure that they will do. And if anybody wants to reach out, Amelia, to join the volunteer pool, or if there's any organisations that are watching this that perhaps need CybAid's help, then I'll be sure to put all the information in the description bit of this video. But once again, thank you very much for coming on the Scooter Space.
Thank you for having me.